Hi everyone. Sorry, I'm gonna adjust my camera. Today is our last day of Sustain Your Holidays with Town. Welcome everyone. We are going to be talking today with my other co-founder, Kelly Mickle, who is an incredible journalist and total badass, amazing researcher, and just one of my dear friends. So I'm excited. Here she is. Let me get Kel on here. And we will also be chatting with Elizabeth Cline. Hold on, sorry guys. We'll also be chatting with Elizabeth Cline, who is an incredible author. Hey!
Hi.
So this is Kelly Mickle. Kel, do you want to introduce yourself really fast?
Yeah, so Jen and I have been friends since college, and I'm now super lucky that we get to work together on something that we both feel really passionate about. And I've been a journalist for years in magazines, and Jen and I came together to work on Town together, and I have not been able to participate in the other lives, but I've been watching, and I'm really excited for this one because being a more mindful consumer is like a huge reason why we started Town and wanting to be more thoughtful about how we move and purchase in the world. And so I'm really excited to talk to Elizabeth because she is an expert in this area and is just a wealth of knowledge. And she should be asking to join as well, I think, or you can join, ask her to join.
Here we go. Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
You're good.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. Thanks for having me on.
We are thrilled.
We're very, very excited. We've been just, inhaling your books. Love it. Love it. So for you guys who are just joining us, this is Elizabeth Cline. She is a badass author and advocate, a pioneer for, in championing ethical fashion and making great choices in the fashion space. You are so incredibly fashionable yourself. So we have so many like questions on how do we be better consumers and what to look for and also be fashionable, which makes you such a great, icon and a great person to ask, expert for this. So quickly, if you don't mind, I would just love just to give an introduction on what you're doing and about yourself. And then I have a million questions for you.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited to get to know both of you better. So for me, the way that I got into this subject, it's funny that, to be called fashionable, because I was thinking before I got on this live, I started out as a fast fashion consumer in my 20s. Like I just owned a ton of clothing and didn't think about my clothes' impact on the planet at all. I like to shop really cheaply. I owned over 300 items of clothes. I talk about this in the beginning of Overdressed. And it started as just like personal curiosity for me, because when Overdressed came out, there wasn't really any information out there about fast fashion, the impact of fast fashion on the planet. I think it's kind of like, a lot of people think that if you're going to get into ethical and sustainable fashion, you have to sort of check your style at the door. And I've really had the opposite experience, where the more I learn about the fashion industry and the more I understand about the fashion industry, the good and bad sides of it, the more I like just appreciate the history and tradition of what we wear. I don't know, have y'all had a similar experience?
Yeah, I feel like Kel and I have talked about this a lot, and we knew each other when, we were early consumers in New York City at NYU together, big, like, I think that was when the height of Sex and the City was out. And so everyone was like, how do we, be fashionable? And it was fast. But we talk all the time about sort of this, and you touch upon it in your book about, pre-World War II, post-World War II, and when fashion changes, and um,
Hmm.
how we have such little appreciation these days for those kinds of skill sets of like sewing. I couldn't sew a button on to save my life. You
Yeah.
know? Um, and it's interesting, like we were talking earlier about food as well, and this
Yeah.
inability to know, or this, you know, putting blinders on to know where our food comes from, you know, or how our clothes are made, and you know,
Hmm.
that's and that aren't appreciated anymore. So
Yeah.
I don't know,
I
it's something,
love, I
but
also loved in the book when you talked about the whole idea of wardrobe building in the conscious closet. And it reminded me a lot about meal planning in some ways, because we talk about that a lot, or we have on town, and how that can help us be less wasteful in like in the kitchen. And
Hmm.
it makes a lot of sense that like some of those theories in your closet of like thinking about what you have, like go look in your closet before you go out shopping to assess what's already there, just like you would do in your cupboards before you go to the grocery store, and what can you make with what you already have. And I thought there were a lot of ideas in there about wardrobe building that were really fascinating. Do you mind sharing a little bit about how that works to the people who haven't read your book?
That's so funny that you bring that up because I haven't thought about that section in a while. But one thing that I wanted to add to what you were saying is that I think so much of like the ethical and sustainable fashion community, much like the slow food movement, is like people trying to find those points of connection. Like, you know, sure, there's something kind of like extraordinary about the fact that we can walk into a store and buy a shirt, a full outfit for $20. Like that's never been possible in the history of human civilization to be able to do that. But that it's also come with quite a cost. And, you know, part of it is just this disconnection from these habits that I think that can lead to building a better wardrobe. You know, like it's gotten more difficult in a way to put yourself together because there's so much choice out there. Everything's so cheap. So I'm trying to think back to the wardrobe build. You might have to tell me what's in there. I mean, one of the things is, you know, and I think that this is to some degree common sense, is like making sure you know what you have. Like I like using, you know, apps like Cladwell to just make sure that I know everything that's in my wardrobe, so I am actually using it. Like I go through a lot and rotate, make sure that anything I've been wearing a lot, I move to the back. Because sometimes when we go out and shop, we're looking for novelty, but you can find that novelty in your closet as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
well, how would someone start? Like I
Hmm.
so Kelly and I started Town together, and it was mainly because of our curiosity of how to be better consumers, because we were really faced with, or we, you know, when we were really searching in the, you know, green space on how to be better consumers and better
Yeah.
stewards of the planet, it was kind of all or nothing. You know, either you give up everything and you are completely green, or it's like doom and gloom and there's nothing you can do. And we were trying to find this balance, and we're both consumers, and I love fashion. I've always loved fashion, and I know Kel does too. But I
Hmm.
I you know, we where do we start? Like, what is the first?
Hmm.
That's something that I really struggle with. Is, you know, is it organic cotton? Is it, do I look at the, you know,
Right.
the you know, is it nylon, polyester? Like,
Hmm.
do I look at the, you know, the ethics within, you know, the garment workers, and how do we build
Yeah.
a better wardrobe with, you know, with that, not, how do we know what to look for essentially?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's such a good question because I know it's really easy to get overwhelmed. I think that this is one way that fashion is really different from food, because with food, let's say you're going to decide to eat differently, you could clean out your whole fridge and go to the grocery store and start over, you know, in a day. Whereas with fashion, first of all, it's not sustainable to throw out everything you wear or
Yeah.
own already. Um, and I say this in the conscious closet, like if your goal is to be a mindful consumer, that's a lifelong journey. So there's absolutely no timeline in terms of like, you have to be complete, done with this within a year or within 5 years or 10 years. Like I wrote Overdressed came out almost 10 years ago. And like, I'm still learning new things about the fashion industry. And I think the first step is mindfulness. We've already talked about this a few times. It's just deciding that you're going to ask questions about where your clothes come from. I think in terms of being like more specific, the advice I give in the Conscious Closet is to start with labels. So start paying attention to the fibers that your clothes are made out of and the places that your clothes are made. I think that that's like a pretty easy shift, because thanks to the internet, you can kind of just start going, and finding out more information about cotton, what working conditions are like in Bangladesh, what they're like in China, what they're like in the United States, and really just start there. Like, I'm going to decide to be aware. I think that's the mind shift involved is such a significant part of the transformation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as people are kind of going out in this crazy overconsumption time, holiday shopping, do you have any advice for people on what they should look for, what to avoid?
I mean, I'm a big fan of shopping small, shopping local, supporting independent businesses when you can. In the climate movement, a lot of people say that there's only like a handful of businesses that are responsible for climate change. And I think that a lot of the impact in the fashion industry is also being perpetuated by a handful of huge corporations who just have waste and overproduction and exploitation built into their business model. And if you have the opportunity to support a small sustainable fashion company this holiday season, like, I encourage everyone to do it. I also love, and I'd love to know how y'all feel about this, like just the rise of people giving secondhand and thrifted gifts for Christmas is so exciting. I've given my my partner's mom, I gave her a vintage Missoni scarf for Christmas. I've given my mom Eileen Fisher Renew, which is their secondhand line. And it's just really interesting to see how attitudes around secondhand shopping have changed over the years. So what about y'all? What are your like sustainable Christmas and holiday season hacks?
I mean, some of it has been trying to introduce, like, motivating myself with products that help me live more sustainably, like the beeswax wraps and the stasher bags and those kinds of things that you can use in your everyday life have been great stocking stuffers, and then kind of force me to remember to incorporate them more into my life. I've also received some things from family members, like kind of hand-me-downs that are really special to me because they're items in their homes, my aunt's house, that she knew I loved as a child. And so at Christmas, she's been like wrapping those and giving them to me. And it is interesting how much more valuable those things are than something new that you would buy at the store.
Yeah. I love that idea of giving things that are also meaningful to you to someone else. The last chat that we had that was so interesting, we were talking about with Jessica Gross about, I think when you buy and purchase a gift, it goes down by 20% in value, which I thought was also really interesting. I don't know how she calculated that, but I thought that was so fascinating that already it loses value, like driving a car off the lot.
Yeah.
So we were chatting also about, taking things like, I love books. I love to read, and I cannot read on a Kindle. I can't read on the tablet. It's really challenging for me. And
I'm the same way.
It's so nice to be able to take notes and feel it.
Yeah.
So I love giving books that I've read. And my sister-in-law is she's so rad. She's so thrifty, and she's so good at not being wasteful. So I look to her an awful lot. But we were talking about, because there are four cousins, she's got 4 kids, and they live down the street. So we were talking about ways in which our kids can exchange gifts, and we were talking about hand-me-downs and things that maybe they can make or something that they love that they could give to their cousins. I just think that we have our temperature and taste for that has gone in a wonky way, and I need to kind of be way more okay with things that are used because they have a lot of value in them, and sentimental, you know, they're sentimental and meaningful. So I'm trying to retrain myself to feel that way, and also help with our kids so that, you know, they don't think that they have to constantly consume as well and buy things, because it's so easy, you know, when we're hit with all of this external, you know, I'm guilty of it too, you know, making a business on social media, you know, you just see how it's constant, just buy this and do this, and it's like, where do you turn? So I'm going to retrain myself into like giving things that are meaningful.
I think there's a lot to unlearn. Like there are certain things, like you talk a lot about repairing the things and investing in the things that you already have. And I think that's something that in a lot of ways, I was almost taught the opposite, that like putting money into something that's old is almost wasteful. It's like by the time you spend money to fix it, you could just buy something new. So it's almost like a waste of money. And that's totally untrue. And the more that you invest in the things that you already have, what I really liked in your book, you talked about how you become more bonded to those items and you feel more attached to them. And I think that's so true. Are there any other sort of narratives that you find around fashion that you feel like are shifting, or you feel like need to shift?
I'm going to build off of that. I think that the interest in mending has been so fascinating. Like I have a good friend, Kate Sekulis, who put out a book that's called Mend. I think it was in 2020. It was right after The Conscious Closet came out. And it's this wonderful history of mending. Because what's so interesting about her work is there had not been a commercially written history of mending. Like mending, it's women's work. It's just something that no one had really even thought about sitting down and looking at the tradition of craft around mending. So it's interesting, one, just seeing people appreciate the art of repair and seeing young people getting back into mending. I mean, one thing that I already sort of knew how to do and I got better at doing while I was writing The Conscious Closet was learning how to darn, which is actually reweaving knitwear. And that is something that just would have seemed so impossible, like tedious. Why would you ever want to mend your socks? But I cannot even tell you, it is like one of the most satisfying things to learn how to do. And I think that there's a tutorial in Mend, and there's one in The Conscious Closet as well. I think getting people repair kits for the holidays is such a good idea.
Great idea.
Because it doesn't seem like it's going to be fun, but it is so much fun, and it's so satisfying to fix things.
Oh, I'm sure it's very cathartic too, to sit and
right. You're like watching Netflix and like,
I need to get better at I took a knitting class once, and I would get to a certain point and then I would shift and realize that I was doing it like the opposite, and I was like, but it was so therapeutic and just felt like, I don't know, going in stressed and you leave just feeling a little bit more relaxed. And you know, your socks are mended and
yeah, one kind of like funny thing about the pandemic is like, because I wasn't really going out like most of us for a long time, and so my clothes weren't wearing out, and one of my coats, the pocket tore a couple weeks ago, and it's like the first thing that's kind of worn out in a while, and I was so excited because I was like, yay, I get to sit down and mend something. I hadn't been able to do it in a long time, and it felt really good.
It's amazing. It's so crazy that we're talking about basic skill sets that we have gone strayed so far away from. I'm really in desperate need of learning a lot of these, and
there was something that I wanted to share with your community in terms of like shopping sustainably. I mean, I think that, you know, sustainability, it's got a certain common sense quality to it.
Mhm.
Like if you want to be a sustainable fashion consumer, every article of clothing, even if it's green, it takes a lot of resources to
Yeah.
make it. So really the simplest thing you can do is, you know, try not to overconsume. If you already have a lot of beautiful clothes, get more wear out of them. But then the other my other tip, and I talk about this a lot in the book, is taking really good care of your clothing so that it lasts a long time and you're happy to wear it for a long time, but also so it can have a second life. You know, if you sell it to a thrift store on a resale platform, the condition of clothes, that is like the biggest determinant of whether something can actually be reworn. So that's one of the reasons why I spend a lot of time in the book talking about, you know, uh, laundry and stain removal, and yeah, sewing that button back on, because it really does make a huge difference. I worked in the secondhand industry for a long time, and I really saw how people were treating their clothes. I think that's just one of the kind of like byproducts of cheap fashion, is people just kind of abuse their clothing.
Right.
You know, something gets a stain on it, you don't even bother to get it out. So a lot of my work is like focused on shifting people away from that mentality too.
Especially with kids as well.
Yeah. Oh God, I can't even imagine. Yeah.
Like,
No, it even seems like the secondhand options now have changed a lot, because I think there is some barrier to the sustainability space, because in that it feels, in addition to sometimes it being expensive,
Mhm.
it can feel like time intensive, like learning to mend, sifting through like giant racks at a thrift store that are like, it can feel very intimidating. But I feel like there's so many new sites now, they're almost make it as easy as just shopping in a regular store. Like are there any resale shops or rentals shops that you recommend or feel like people should check out, or worth exploring?
I mean, I think I probably use all the ones that everyone's already familiar with. You know, I shop on ThredUp. That's usually where I will still buy fast fashion. Uh, you know, and I love Poshmark. I also think like just supporting your local thrift stores. You know, one thing that I wanted to give a shout out to is most of the online resale platforms, they have gift cards now. So if you're a gift card person, ThredUp, the Real, I think even Goodwill does gift cards. So that's another thing you could get, get for people for the holidays.
That's a great idea.
yeah.
Hmm.
I don't think
Okay.
I knew that.
I do have a question. This is something I really struggle with, which is I will see something like at Decades and it's online, or I'll see
Hmm.
like that is sustainable fashion in like London or England, and I'll buy it. And then I'm like, well, shoot, am I offsetting this now or am I contributing to more global warming because I'm flying it in from somewhere else? Like, how far do I go? And is there a way to,
Hmm.
carbon neutral, and how do I do this?
Oh, I think you have to be easier on yourself. I mean, fast fashion, um, so much of the reason why it persists is it's not because of our shopping decisions. It's a systemic problem. There are a lot of reasons why the fashion industry keeps getting bigger. It keeps getting more wasteful, despite the fact that there are more and more people like us who want the industry to change. And that's one of the reasons why I've gotten much more involved in recent years um, in collective action and systemic change, and talking to my elected leaders and trying to get new laws passed, because we have a lot of power as consumers, and it's so important to build a sustainable fashion culture and like protect it so it doesn't get completely like subsumed by fast
Mhm.
fashion. But we also are going to have to tackle a lot of these issues like at the root, through social movements, through new laws, through different types of education in our schools. I'm telling you all of this because I just don't think that you should put that much pressure on yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we all are feeling like, how do we set an example and try to, you know, be as good as we can be? And it always just seems like there's an asterisk. So it's always like, well, then there's this, and then there's this, and just finding out and figuring out, navigating it all, and trying to make all of the pieces work together. Another thing that I'm also curious on how to be better at is sustainable and ethically made, and that those go hand in hand. How can we be more mindful of that as well?
That's such a good point. I do think that I see a lot of the conversation in the sustainable fashion movement is so focused on materials. Like, if we just replace our plastic leggings with recycled plastic, or our cotton with organic cotton, or our leather with vegan leather, then suddenly the fashion industry is going to be sustainable. But I mean, that doesn't take into consideration the people who are making fashion at all, in the communities where fashion is produced. You know, like, what kind of impact would it have on the communities that produce textiles if suddenly, you know, we stopped making leather, which is an incredibly, can be a very toxic process, and switch it all to plastic, you know, which means more petroleum refineries in people's neighborhoods, more microplastic pollution in our oceans. Every material has an environmental impact, even things that are sold to us as green. And especially in the fashion industry, because everything is just made at such a huge scale. So I do think it's really, really important to put people and social sustainability like at the heart of our conversations. And that can mean, you know, when you're shopping for clothes, and I admit this can be difficult, trying to support companies that either say they're paying living wages, or maybe they're, you know, fair trade, or they can at least tell you the full story about who is making their product. You know, is it artisans in a particular country? Do they own their own facility? What are they able to share with you about that process and the people who are behind our clothes?
Yeah. The journey of that is so, it's lost. It just like the food system, it's so lost from, you know, from where it started to how it gets in our fridge. It's so fascinating to me.
I think that's one reason why people focus on materials too, because it makes things easier, you know, like it's something you have control over. Like, okay, I can just switch to organic cotton and then I'll feel a bit more sustainable. But the reality is that this issue is like way more complex than that. And like fixing it is way more complex than that.
So then when you do talk about fixing, I know you talked about this earlier, in order for us to make a bigger impact, it's obviously on a much larger scale than just us individuals as consumers. It's also about talking to our, you know, our representatives and making big. So, I mean, what are some ways in which people can get more involved?
Yeah, so I thought of a couple of different nonprofits that I wanted to tell everyone about. So I'm the director of advocacy and policy at Remake, which is at Remake Our World. And one of the things that we worked on in 2021 was a bill in California called the Garment Worker Protection Act, which aims to it's very simple, but raise garment worker wages in California to the legal minimum. They were being paid, like, some of them under $3 an hour. Yeah, sewing clothes for really big companies like Fashion Nova, Forever 21, and Ross. And we built this really amazing coalition to win the bill. The first time it went through, it didn't pass. So we essentially like broaden the coalition. And it was it was a lot of women. It was mostly a women-led coalition, women of color-led coalition, and it was ethical and sustainable fashion businesses. We had over 150 brands and ethical fashion businesses endorsed it. And then we had this like global movement of conscious fashion consumers sharing information about it on social media. And it was so crucial to winning the bill, like having just people in our community calling the senator, calling the California governor, writing postcards. Like a lot of people who participated in the campaign had never called in to support a bill before, and we won. So if you're looking for nonprofits to give to, obviously I'm going to plug the one I'm part of, Remake. But there's also 3 others that I wanted to plug. Sustainable BK is an educational nonprofit in Brooklyn that educates about sustainable fashion through a anti-racist and decolonial lens. Custom Collab is another New York nonprofit that is doing workforce development and training immigrant and low-income women of color to be in business in sustainable fashion. So highly, highly recommend following them and supporting their work. And then also in Los Angeles, the Garment Worker Center, they're the ones that fought behind the garment worker bill that I just mentioned. And they're just a fantastic worker rights organization. And I know all of those nonprofits would love, if you're looking for somewhere to give this holiday season, and you're looking to get more involved in systemic change, give them a follow, and yeah, just find ways to get more involved.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you so much. Everyone, please,
Yes.
these badass books, if you don't have them already.
They're so good, really.
So good. Truly, they are. I mean, I love how much you bring yourself, throughout, because it's really helpful to see your journey as well.
Yeah.
And I also love this quote, which says that Overdressed does for t-shirts and leggings what Fast Food Nation did for burgers and fries, which I think is so true and so helpful to put it in perspective. Love these books, and we love that you're here, and thank you so much for your time and expertise, and love soaking all this up and picking your brain.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, same here. And then where, I want to make sure that everyone can follow along with what you're up to. So where can people find you?
I mean, I think Instagram really is the best way to keep up with what I'm doing. So Elizabeth L. Cline, and my link in my bio has all of my information about where you can buy my books, read my latest articles that I've written, and just keep up with the, especially if you want to do more like collective action and campaigns, you can also follow along there as well.
Awesome. And then I'm going to link your books in my stories. Is there a particular bookstore, because we love promoting small bookstores as well. Is there a particular bookstore that I can link to? I know I'm pretty spot right now, so.
I think all of that is in my bio link, like the way to order from your local, from like an independent bookstore. Awesome. Yeah, so I can get it to you after we hop off live. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Cal,
Thank you so much. No, this has been amazing. I hope we can continue this conversation again in the future. It's been really cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks again. Bye. Bye.